Hello and welcome to the basic concepts in statistical inference. In this short meeting, we are going to discuss four main definitions, and we use them a lot in statistics, like population, parameter, sample, statistics. What is the meaning of those definitions? All right, so as I mentioned, in a statistic, we use data to learn about groups to make conclusions, so we have to understand those definitions, and understanding these terms is very important for correct data analysis and interpretation. So the first definition is the definition of population. A population is the entire group of individuals or objects of interest in a study, right? So it's the entire group of individuals or objects. I said objects here because suppose we are interested in studying the palm trees in California, right? So those are not individuals, those are objects, right? Now, examples of population, like all students at a university. Suppose we have a large university. Let's say we have 10,000 students in that university. So this is our population. Another example, all registered voters in a state, maybe like 1 million people, 2 millions, 3 millions, right? So those are examples of population. The key point here is studying the entire population is costly and time consuming. Suppose, for example, in the state of California, there are like 10 million registered voters, and we want to ask them some questions. So it's very costly and time consuming to ask every individual voter in California, right? Because you have to hire people to collect the data, and you have to pay for those individuals to collect the data. So it's time consuming, takes time, takes maybe months to get the result, and also you have to pay a lot of money to collect the data. All right, so this is the meaning of population. Now, a sample is a subset from that population. Okay, for example, instead of asking the entire students in a university, our sample, for example, is 500 randomly selected students from a university. So we take a sample from that population, and we are going to learn some sampling techniques or sampling methods in the next meeting, because there are some ways to collect a sample from that population, right? Instead of the entire voters, maybe we can take a sample of 1,000 voters before the election, right? So those are examples of sample. The key point here is samples are used to draw conclusion about the population. So once we have a sample from that population, we can create, for example, the confidence interval and make statistical inference. We are going to talk about those definitions later in this course. But once we know the sample, we can make a conclusion about the population. Next is parameter. Parameter is numerical value that describes a characteristic of population. So a parameter is numerical measure that describes the population, such as population mean, right? And population variance. So it describes the population, like mean GPA of all students at a university, right? So we have the entire, it describes the entire population. So we are going to calculate the mean GPA of all students at the university, and this is called the mu. So a mu, or the population mean, is an example of parameter. Another example, proportion of voters who support a candidate. This is called P. So P is is called population proportion. And this is an example of parameter, right? And the parameters are usually unknown because this numerical measure is based on the population, and in general, we don't collect data from the entire population because it's costly and time consuming. So in general, the parameters such as mu and p are unknown because they describe the population. Statistic is a numerical measurement that describes the sample, right? So the parameter describes the population. Statistic, not statistics, statistic, there is no S. Statistic describes the sample. For example, the mean GPA of a sampled student. So for example, suppose we collect data or randomly select 500 students, and then we calculate those the GPA of those selected students. So in this case, we calculate the sample mean, or X bar. So X bar is called sample mean. Sample mean. Mu is called population mean. So the population mean is parameter, the population proportion is a parameter. X bar is the sample mean, and this is statistic. A sample proportions supporting candidate, this is called p hat. P hat, so this notation is hat, and this is an example of sample. All right, so statistics are known once a sample is collected. So once we have our sample, we can calculate the sample mean, we can calculate the sample proportion, right? All right, so here connecting the concepts, for example, a sample is taken from a population, right? It's a subset from the population. Statistic is computing from the sample, such as X bar, which is statistic. We calculate X bar based on a sample of individuals or objects, right? A parameter describes the population, and statistic are used to estimate parameters. All right, so I hope this is clear before we move to the next topics. Thank you.